Hi, yes, I'm Nicola from Ad Free Cities. I'm going to talk about advertising. So just to get us in the mood, just want you to have a think about advertising. Where do you see advertising? Think about your day to day, how you got here, what you did. Where did you see advertising? Maybe you checked your phone in the morning, you saw adverts on your phone. Maybe you walked somewhere, maybe you saw adverts on the side of a bus. Maybe you saw adverts on TV, you heard them on the radio, maybe you saw them on billboards. And just think for a moment, what effect that has on you? How does that make you feel? What kind of influence that has on you? I sometimes do an exercise on this, but there's too many people here, so just absorb that, have a think about it. Some people might think that advertising is there to give us information, to help us make choices about things. But if that was the case, then adverts would look much more like this one on the left. But they don't. They look like this one on the right. Advertisers don't want to engage with us rationally. They want to manipulate our feelings. They're using sex to sell us things that we probably didn't really need. They tap into our insecurities. They manufacture our desires. Here's another example. Advertising uses notions of love and family and connection to sell us stuff. And we see this, with countless adverts. They also make us feel inadequate, like this advert for a weight loss product, which I'm sure nobody needs. But adverts are using these tactics, making us feel inadequate, making us compare ourselves to other people in order to buy things that we really don't need. Another thing that advertising does is just normalize the continued consumption, right? They just make it feel normal to keep consuming. Really, behind an advert like this, £5 Boohoo clothing, lies sweatshops, exploited workers, underpaid workers, overworked, exploitation, but adverts don't tell us that. There's a lot of comparisons you can make between this and meat advertising, which we can come on to in a bit, but it's basically there to conceal the reality, to distract us from the truth, to make us feel that there's nothing wrong, just carry on consuming £5 clothes. However, they can't completely pretend there's nothing wrong, because people do care about the impact of the things that we buy. So adverts also use our concerns to sell us things. Climate crisis, don't worry, carry on flying, we've got zero emissions flights. It's obviously total nonsense. Carry on eating beef burgers, we've got reduced methane burgers. Did anyone see this advert? This is a genuine advert from Burger King. We're working to change our cows' diet and help fight climate change. They said they were feeding cows lemongrass in their diets, and that was reducing the methane. It was totally debunked, of course. But adverts like this, they persuade people to think they're doing something positive by buying a product that is just clearly harmful. It's a distraction. It's telling us we can consume our way out of the crises that we face. And the big problem with that is that advertising is delaying, like this, is delaying progress on real action that we need to the greener, kinder, fairer world that we all want to see. And the problem is it's everywhere. So this is one of the reasons that we, Ad Free Cities, as a group, we focus on outdoor advertising in particular. It's unavoidable. It's all around us in our towns and cities when we move through our lives. It's particularly intrusive. We can't avoid it. It's there without our consent. We cannot choose not to see it. And it's using public space to sell us things, to profit big brands, big corporations. We think public space could be used in a much better way. And the increasing spread of digital advertising, particularly large-scale digital screens like this huge screen in Bristol, is even more of a problem. It's even more unavoidable. These screens can show us 6 ads every minute. They're in our faces. They're very bright. Particularly intrusive. People don't like them. I could talk more about that. We do a lot of work on preventing screens like this, but that's for another time. Advertising also, crucially, has a very powerful normalizing effect. The advertising that surrounds us, that we see day to day, it shapes our culture. It shapes what we perceive to be normal. What company do you think spends the most on outdoor advertising in the UK? Absolutely, yeah. Spot on, McDonald's. By far, absolutely by far. So these are the top 10 spenders on roadside advertising in the UK last year. McDonald's spent 78.5 million on roadside advertising. I mean, way above double the next in line. You can also see KFC's high up there, Tesco and Sainsbury's, who also use quite a lot of meat in their adverts as well. But McDonald's is just way out in front. McDonald's adverts are everywhere. What's on all these McDonald's ads? It's just burgers, just meat, pictures of meat, all around us. And it's the same with Burger King adverts, KFC adverts, Subway adverts. The effect of this is just to make people think that meat consumption is normal. It's part of our everyday lives. It's accepted. This is a Tesco advert near my house a few years ago. Horrific. It's violence and death hiding in plain sight, really, isn't it? Consuming animals is such an accepted part of our culture that it goes unquestioned. People are quite happy, apparently, to walk past a picture like this on the street. The industries which intensively farm animals rely on this normalization, this cultural acceptance of consuming animals in order to keep on selling us their products. And whether we like it or not, advertising does work. It's a major driver of overconsumption, particularly of some of the most harmful products like meat and like high carbon products, other high carbon products, I should say. There was a report a couple of years ago into the carbon emissions generated by advertising in the UK. You can look it up. It's called Advertised Emissions by a group called Purpose Disruptors. They found that these emissions generated by advertising in the UK had risen by 11% between 2019 and 2022 to 208 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent. That means that advertising is responsible for 32% of the carbon footprint of every person in the country. It's a huge deal. There's other research which, unsurprisingly, has shown that when people, particularly children, are exposed to more advertising for unhealthy food, they consume more unhealthy food. It works. I think this nicely altered McDonald's advert quite nicely sums up the health problems with McDonald's and also the industry's attitude. So that's bad news. Advertising works. It's making us buy lots of crap. The good news is, though, that restricting advertising also works. So there was a ban across the London Transport Network. Excuse me. In 2019, there was a ban on all junk food, or what's known as high-fat, salt and sugar foods, HFSS food, across the London Transport Network in 2019. And a study after that showed that it had led to, or prevented, 95,000 cases of obesity, thousands of cases of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. This suggests that ending advertising for meat and dairy could have a really significant impact in reducing demand and consumption. We can talk more about that in a minute. I just want to talk about some other tactics of the advertising industry. A really obvious one is just to conceal the truth, like we were talking about earlier. So as we know, factory farms, slaughterhouses, they're out of sight. The industry has to operate in secrecy. And they need us to look away. They need us to not think about the reality to keep selling us these products. And advertising plays a major role in maintaining this facade. You know, at best, I would say, these adverts are extremely selective in what they show. I mean, this leaves out all of the important aspects of this cow's experience. These comforting images of happy cows and rolling fields, they work to keep us ignorant perhaps willfully so. Here's another very well-known example, Happy Eggs adverts. We know, from investigations that that farms supplying Happy Eggs, the conditions are nothing like in the adverts. These chickens are living in, the hens are living in cramped, disease-ridden conditions. Some of them never go outside. So, at best, very selective. At worst, just downright deceptive. Linked to this, advertising also will often portray animals as consenting, as like willingly engaging, it's weird, but when you think about it, it's a really common trope. Does anyone remember showing my age here, the 1980s advert, the anchor cows dancing around in the fields? We are lucky cows. Yeah, I mean, that's a sort of classic example. This is more recent, actually. This is also an anchor butter advert. It's a TV advert from 2011, where the cows are working in the dairy. They're like churning the butter and packing it up into lorries to send out. It's this kind of, it's that kind of story that helps maintain this fantasy that cows are like willingly engaging in this system which is exploiting them. I want to just touch on this concept of erasure. This is what Professor Aaron Stibbe says. The meat and dairy industry uses powerful linguistic and visual techniques to convey stories that animal products are healthy, delicious, masculine, natural, and a path to love, and that farms are beneficial to animals. The language and images of the industry also work to erase the reality of animals as sensitive, intelligent beings who suffer and die in the process of making the products. What he's saying is, adverts are erasing the real living animals so that when we consume them, we don't consider their importance. And this example is, there are countless examples of this, but one example is the KFC dancing chicken advert. It was the most complained about advert in 2017. It showed a chicken dancing to a rap song. It was basically hiding the reality for chickens who are confined and killed by KFC behind this humorous dancing chicken. Loads of people complained about it. They didn't take any action, the regulator. But this is all about disconnecting us from the real animals, right? Sometimes adverts don't show any food at all, right? This is a McDonald's TV advert. Doesn't show any food, no restaurants, and nothing. It's just about creating a kind of positive feeling about the McDonald's brand. No mention of the food, let alone its origins. So it's all about distancing, disconnecting us, making us not think about the animals, really. Another way this is done is objectification. So adverts will often portray animals as comedic, inferior, or use oppressive language. The laughing cow is an old example. So it's this really disturbing one from decades ago, Piggy Snacks, this cartoon pig frying up the pork pieces. But this is a more recent one, an Arla advert, which uses, this language. We care about our girls. It's this language of property, of ownership, basically encouraging us to believe that animals are property. We can do what we like with them. All of this, I guess what I'm trying to say is all of this helps to create the culture necessary for people to consent to the exploitation of animals. Advertising plays a really major role in doing this. And people might be familiar with the work of Carol Adams, who wrote The Sexual Politics of Meat. She's been talking about this for decades. We objectify animals in the same way that we objectify the female. Laughing cow's a very good example of that. There was a report last year. It's really interesting. Well, it's a paper in the Journal of Applied Philosophy, which looked at how advertising interferes with our ability to make moral choices. It's really interesting. So I'm just going to read you this quote. So they call them happy cow messages, the messages that they talk about. So happy cow messages and misleading adverts make it harder for individuals to act on the basis of moral considerations that they are typically concerned with, e.g. human rights or animal welfare. Thus, they thwart consumers' capacity to lead a life coherent with their own values. So, advertising is getting in the way of us making moral choices, of people being able to make the choices that are really in line with the values that they have. So we look at a lot of this and some other tactics of meat and dairy advertising in a guide that we brought out last year, The Cows Aren't Laughing. You can find that on our website. We look at greenwashing, which is like a major an increasing way that advertisers are in the industry are making us believe they're part of the solution. We also look at humane washing or ethics washing. You'll be familiar with adverts that try and marketing that tries to persuade us that the industry has the welfare as their highest priority. Just want to look at one more before we move on to what we can do about it, because I think this is really important. Like, adverts often will evoke a nostalgia. This whole idea of like the happy farmer, the small farmer, it's really about it's this idea that we're conditioned to from childhood, right? Of this happy farm where there's like a happy farmer with one cow and one pig and one chicken, and they all live together really happily. And there's no mention of why they're there or the fact that they're going to die. No mention of that at all. And I think that advertising will often roll out this trope a lot. It's the same with fake farm names. Like supermarkets will have fake farm names, when actually behind them are these enormous giants who are actually pushing out small farmers. They're actually, pushing small farmers towards intensification or out of business. And yet they will use, the trope of the small farmer to sell their products. The story is very different from the reality. That's the nutshell, isn't it? But so, what can we do? Well, consider this. Not so long ago, this was really common, right? We saw tobacco advertising on the streets, like where kids could just walk past it, in magazines, in sports sponsorship. We got rid of tobacco advertising because we knew how harmful it was. There are growing calls now to end other kinds of harmful advertising as we face the climate crisis. We work with a campaign called Badvertising and campaigning groups all over the world, actually, who are calling for an end to fossil fuel advertising. And there's been quite a lot of attention on that. The city of Amsterdam in 2021 voted to get rid of adverts for fossil fuels and airlines. We also work with a lot of local councils who are introducing restrictions on harmful advertising. Policies to restrict adverts for junk food, alcohol, gambling. Just a couple of weeks ago, Sheffield City Council introduced what we think is the most progressive policy yet, which also restricts advertising for airlines and polluting cars, including hybrids. Policies like this could easily include meat and dairy, and I know that's something plant-based councils are calling for as well. So we need to have these conversations. We need to get this in people's minds, which we're doing. We need to challenge misleading advertising. One way we can do this is through the regulator, through the ASA. They don't really have teeth, to be honest, but we have had some success in taking this route, and I think we could do the same with misleading meat and dairy advertising. So last year, we managed to get a greenwashing campaign by Shell banned, and a precedent was set then. The ASA said that, this is the Advertising Standards Authority, the regulator, said that in future, when fossil fuel companies were advertising their green credentials, so-called green credentials, they would have to make it clear that the majority of their business was still in fossil fuel extraction. So you can imagine something similar with the meat industry, right? The honesty that they would, the additional information they would have to be giving you. We've had similar success with Toyota SUV campaigns and some HSBC greenwashing campaigns. We tried with the recent Let's Eat Balanced campaign. We didn't really expect to be successful, but we thought we'd better have a go. This was a campaign which I'm sure you've seen by the Agricultural and Horticultural Development Board, which comes out to coincide with Veganuary. They're an arm's length body supported by DEFRA, funded by farmer levies. And this advert was all about appealing, that they intended to appeal to people who were thinking about reducing meat and dairy consumption, right? That was who they were targeting at. And they use health claims and nature to promote beef and lamb and dairy. Our complaint said that this was irresponsible to be encouraging increased consumption of meat and dairy when we know that that's the opposite of what's needed. They didn't take any action, but we weren't very surprised because they quite carefully crafted the adverts to not break any of the codes. But I think future actions like this could be really effective, and I think that taking action against other kinds of misleading advertising, dairy advertising, the kinds of big burger advertising that we've looked at already, could be really effective. It also helps us build the case for tighter regulation and also for ending meat and dairy advertising altogether. These kinds of stories can generate, press attention and help us have that conversation. I'm going to finish. I'm interested in what you think. I'm kind of hoping that this might be the start of some really good conversations we can have, and maybe, what I'd love to take away from today is the start of an alliance of organisations and individuals who want to join this call for an end to meat and dairy advertising. I don't think it's something that we'll achieve straight away, but I think it's something that it's definitely feasible in the future. And I think if we start challenging these stories now and calling for this now, we'll have a successful campaign eventually. I just want to leave you with this. So Ad Free Cities is a network of local groups who are resisting advertising where they live. And they also showcase positive alternatives. And this is a project by our group in Bristol, Adblock Bristol, who have repurposed a billboard, and they work with local artists to put artwork up there. And this one is by an artist called Dazcat, and it's about promoting local food, local businesses over burger chains. And just finally, here's a couple of examples of artwork that I love that challenges meat advertising in public spaces. This one's by an artist called Seize the Mean, and this one is from Animal Rising. So I'll leave you with that. And thank you very much for coming today.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. That was really interesting. So we've only got time for about 1 or 2 questions. If anybody has, there we go, over there.
Thank you. Hi, Nicola. Thanks for that. I live right by that M32 digital billboard and have given my enraged local resident voice to Adblock Bristol before. But I was wondering, has there been any success in actually stopping these billboards from being built in the first place? Like, I bought the house as the planning was going through. So I don't know if we can start trying to block the planning permission or things like that, or what reason we can give to stop them going up in the first place.
Yes, thank you for asking that. And I'm sorry that you live so close to that horrible screen. Yes, the answer is yeah. I mean, we've tried to get them taken down. It's very, very difficult to get them taken down once they're up. They are worth a lot of money to the people who put them up there. But we have had a lot of success in preventing screens like that from going up in the first place. That's something that our local groups, Adblock Bristol, and groups in about 8 other cities in the UK do day to day as their work as volunteers. They identify planning applications for new big digital screens, and they mobilise opposition. And we've managed to prevent about 40 big screens in Bristol from going up. So it would look. Thank you. Yeah. But I think Bristol would look very different, actually, without them. But there's definitely more we can do. But yeah, we can do that. There's lots of challenges with that, though. We could talk more about that.
Hi, great talk. So I was just in the vegan hacktivist session, and I'm wondering if we could leverage hacking and actually get all those digital billboards to have pro-vegan messages on.
Good question. So subvertising and kind of repurposing advertising spaces is a really big part of this movement. I think both animal rights and anti-consumerism, it's definitely a big part of it and a really important part of the story. Ad Free Cities is not a subvertising group. We kind of set up to just provide a slightly different take on it than that. Although I think a lot of our members do get involved in that activity. One thing I would say is that having a go at a digital screen is probably another level of illegality that you just want to be aware of, because starting to interfere with, like you say, hacking, I guess I don't know much about the legal stuff around that, but it's quite different from just going up and sticking a poster up on a board, right? So you'd want to be careful about that. But I think that would be lots of fun, yes.
Just a really quick one, Nicola. You mentioned it to me before, and I just wondered if you could share the impact on those digital billboards on surrounding wildlife, because that remained with me when you spoke about that before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't mention that. I mean, these digital screens, not only do they use a huge amount of electricity, they use the big ones, they use as much electricity as like 11 households. So it's just really unforgivable at a time when we're trying to conserve energy. They also cause a huge amount of light pollution, which is, it's bad for people who live near them. It's also, and they break and they glitch, and they're also really bad for wildlife. There was someone who lives probably not far from you, gave us this really sad story about how the birds in his garden just perpetually sing now because the billboard is shining like this kind of perpetual dawn into its garden. Just really confusing, isn't it? And also for moths who are using light and other wildlife at a time of ecological crisis, it just seems completely bananas to be having these totally unnecessary structures where we live.